Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert and awarded RevTech strategist of 2024. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about the future of sales and isn't about replacing people with AI, but redesigning the system so humans and technology amplify each other. His specialist area is AI agents, and it's about leveraging sales and the wider business through the development and use of AI agents. Now, AI agents are now handling so much of routine work, and he says it's an absolute no-brainer to use them in your system. So we talk about from larger and enterprise and smaller, how you can onboard agents into your systems to reduce headcount. You're going to love this conversation. My next guest comes with over a decade of experience in B2B sales, working with companies like Google, SimilarWeb, Crow and Whatagraph, whether as an individual contributor or leading large sales teams. Currently, he's building Salesforge.ai to give companies the ability to blend their current sales efforts with AI agents to maximize pipeline and drive down costs. In less than a year, they've scaled up from 0 to 30 million ARR. So welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Frank Sondors.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on Scale Your Sales Podcast, and I'm really curious to understand more about your perspective in AI agents and how you use that to leverage sales and business to drive more output and drive down costs.
That's a good question. So I've been in sales for over a decade. Always been in frontline sales. Always worked with different teams. And then my previous gig, I was B2B Sales with a sales team of 50, and now I'm scaling a company called Salesforge, where we help companies to generate more output with significantly fewer humans. And with everything that's been going on in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, on the front of LLMs, so AI, essentially on the front of automation, etc., you're suddenly able to increase significantly the output levels of a single human without necessarily having to hire more humans. And you're definitely observing a lot of this in the US, specifically in the Bay Area, where suddenly, per employee, you're generating a lot of revenue. And that's because these companies or these teams were thinking, not thinking, they were essentially, desiring to scale, in terms of revenue a lot more, but they're trying to find ways of how can they do that without actually having to hire more humans. So, and a lot of that is possible because due to new tooling, technology, etc. And I think we're also one of those enablers in space, specifically on the sales side of things. And today, what we are seeing more and more is essentially where companies are injecting essentially agentic capabilities, or essentially advanced automations that work in tandem with humans. So we're essentially, in our case, that would be with sales teams. And we see something similar also in other spaces like finance, etc. And I think this is literally where the economy is headed. So I don't think you're going to have pure human teams in a lot of parts of the organization. You will have a lot of automation going on, agents doing either fully autonomous activities or semi-autonomous, where it means the humans just supervise maybe for some parts of the agent. But that's really the reality, and that's where we're heading into right now.
So are you really seeing genuine business transformation or simply faster execution of the same old processes?
No, I would say definitely. Well, I mean, it's both, to be honest. But so definitely there's the speed component. So you can apply a lot of systems to massively increase the speed of the same task. So there are some solutions for that. But then on the other hand, you also see massive transformation. And we can just talk about something which is very, very simple. So for example, let's say, in the sales functions, naturally reps would write emails unique to every single recipient, so to each and one of their prospects, right? So they would go and search on LinkedIn, maybe on the web, some form of a signal, some sort of a hook, to really reach out and make the individual respond back to you. But today, with all the capabilities in the tech front, where essentially at scale, within less than a minute, you're able to build very rich context about any individual, whether that's you, me, anybody really, and craft an email with far superior context, than a human would typically be able to do. So it's not just the speed component, but it's also how much how much sort of input you're able to process and so for what sort of velocity, right? So that is the transformation, really. That is the where ultimately, where you're able to do something more output with significantly fewer humans. So yeah, you are seeing transformation of that. And as I mentioned, so majority of that evidence actually today is you can only see in the US and less so in territories like Europe or other parts of the world. But it is coming because ultimately it's inevitable. Because think of it this way: if you're not going to be implementing any of these systems that are transforming your business, your competitors will inevitably, right? So I highly recommend, typically when I speak to any business owner out there or sales leader, that they should be implementing already capabilities already this year, and they're not that expensive, if I'm very honest, to implement. Because ultimately, a lot of these capabilities that you're bringing into your organization, they cost a fraction of the typical labor cost for a rep. So I would typically say, you'll be stupid not to, even consider running multiple tests or implementing different technologies. And especially considering the fact that some technologies you can have what's called a compound effect. So you can build, for example, one example would be, bringing into your organization a tool called N8N. And N8N is like a backbone automation software where you can kill repetitive tasks within your business. And then you will feel like, you're very, you run like a big enterprise company where everything is automated, but suddenly you're able to bring that sort of feeling into your small startup. Right. So these tools, give you the same level of sophistication that an enterprise company would have. Right. So, and that's interesting, because suddenly the playing field, is being leveled out, a bit more, where enterprise companies don't necessarily have, as much of a, delta between you and them. Right. So it's interesting to see how small companies are being able to be not just move fast because they're small, right, and they don't have bureaucracy, but able to have the sophistication level within their business as the big boys out there as well. So we see a lot of that, and so when you combine sophistication with speed, then we see also far better profitability levels in the business. We see companies that they don't need to raise any VC money, so any funding at all. Essentially, you see something today more bootstrap companies than sort of ever before. So this is definitely the trends that we're observing right now with a lot of the businesses that we're working with.
I mean, these gains are really impressive, and after all, small companies always been able to move fast and faster decision making, and that's the beauty of them. There are some reports that highlight AI agents often struggle with the nuances and the sentiments which risk damaging relationships. So although you can do these communication at scale, there is a risk to that where empathy and judgment is really missing. So what's your views on that?
So AI is only as good as sort of the orchestration and the context that it's working with, right? So there's I think a lot of not a lot, maybe there's quite a few solutions in the market maybe that are not yet doing a really good job, but there are plenty of AI solutions that have been orchestrated really well today. That may not have been the case like a year ago. Because AI agents as a topic was still in its infancy last year, but because the way that things are progressing and the amount of money that's being injected into the topic of AI and AI agents, etc., in the world, you see massive progress, and that means within 6 to 12 months, suddenly what didn't work anymore works already. But yes, there are nuances in every process. It doesn't matter sales or other parts of the business. And this is where I'm a big believer that the parts where where there's some nuances, maybe those are better suited from a sort of execution standpoint by humans. And whenever something is slightly more sort of streamlined, when there's essentially not that many nuances within the process, then this is where you're more likely to be using AI agents. So I'm happy to give like an example here. So let's say we have this process where on the inbound motion of our business, which means when people knocking our doors and coming to our website and trying to sign up for a trial, on one hand, on the website, when our sales reps are online, you are able to call our sales reps today by literally clicking the button call and you calling them. It connects to our Slack, which is our communication platform, and then suddenly you're speaking to a real human live in real time, and you can even do a demo if you want to, etc. And the reason why we believe this part of the funnel process is better equipped by the humans is because when people bump into your site, there's a lot of different nuances. They ask you a lot of different questions and types of questions, and it just it's a very broad spectrum in terms of what you're working with and what type of questions they may ask you, right? So this is something that's better equipped for a human. And at the end of the day, humans do want to talk to humans. So in that particular part of the process, we believe it's much better handled by humans. Then we have another process, very similar process where there's a voice sort of capability, and that's handled by full-on voice AI agents in our business. And that is after you sign up within our software. So imagine you're on our site, you spoke to a rep, and you answered a few questions, you went to sign up to a product, but you didn't end up booking yourself into a demo, you didn't end up buying the product, within a particular time frame, which for us is about 7 days. So if after 7 days, you don't end up purchasing anything from us and there's no conversation, essentially it's a ghost town, when we look at this particular individual, right, that has signed up to us, then what happens is that a voice AI agent, which has cloned my voice, will give you a call fully autonomously. It calls you up and it says something along the lines of, hey, this is Frank. I saw that you signed up, roughly a week ago to one of our products. I was wondering, how was your experience like? And so we ask you a few questions, and then what we're doing is we're farming essentially intel at scale. We're trying to figure out why people don't buy the product, what is broken within the platform, why they're not essentially progressing, right? So if you are able to give them a call programmatically after sort of a week, and we do that for 3 weeks. So once a week, we'll give you a call. If you didn't answer, we'll give you a call next week and the next week. So we'll do 3 attempts at least to try and have a conversation with you. So the primary goal is to figure out why you didn't end up buying, right? And maybe answer some of the questions, maybe how we compare to competitors, etc. So it has all that context. Essentially, we're plugging in what's called a RAG. And a RAG is like a knowledge base, all the information about your business and et cetera, et cetera. And then the agent actually definitely scans everything that's happening in our business in a CRM, whether we had any conversations. It checks our mailboxes of different individuals, whether we're having any conversations there. And then it makes a decision to call or not, right? So, and then it doesn't always call, right? So only when it's necessary. And then the secondary goal that the agent has. So once it has had a bit of a chat with you, it will try and schedule, a meeting with you, just kind of essentially trying to bring you back into our funnel and actually have that conversation then with a human. So yeah, it will check essentially the calendar of the reps and they'll try to slot you in, confirm the meeting time, and then the meeting invite would go out. So this is an example where we use voice AI agents because they will do this literally on the clock. After 7 days, they'll give you a call. There's no sort of error. It can answer any question, and it's very streamlined because there's not a lot of sort of wide context that we're working with. I mean, they already checked out the product. They have some sort of experience with the product and whether it's positive or negative, right? And we're just trying to ask very specific questions and push them sort of down the funnel towards kind of the next step, or typically a meeting, that we're looking to book, or actually make them go and purchase the product. So these are the examples of why you should use maybe humans, and then when you should use agents. And sort of this sort of blended approach within a single sort of purchase journey is an example of how you should blend these two capabilities to increase output levels, have a very, very good process, but from a user standpoint as well, have a very efficient process as well, right? So.
I mean, thank you for that example. And I think it clearly demonstrates, when you have a linear process,
yeah,
the AI agents work beautifully. And, my thought was, how do people respond when there's an agent calling them? How is that human response to that?
Good question.
Good? Is
So I
it?
listen to a lot of these calls, right?
Yeah.
Right, because you're always curious,
Yeah, I
what
know.
was the conversation, right? And there's definitely, people that will just, drop because they understand that it's a call and they just don't want to talk to you. But this is also what happens to a typical human. Now, there's no difference. There's no difference there that we have seen. Then, when there is a proper conversation between the agent and the human, there are some points where the human realizes that, oh, it's probably an AI agent. So it asks a question: Is this an AI agent? And then the AI agent says, Yes, this is an AI agent. And then, fun fact is that 100% of the time, so the human keeps on continuing the conversation. So they actually don't drop after that, which is very interesting. But we never mentioned in the beginning that it is an AI agent that's calling you. It's just that it just says, "Hey, this is Frank calling," because has cloned my voice and just talks to the users.
So why
Um,
why don't you mention that at the beginning that it's an agent calling?
Good question.
Because
So we've
from a
seen.
human point of view, I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a bit deceptive.
So yeah, so on one hand, you could say that it's deceptive, but from a user standpoint, they're looking to receive a service. And what we found is whether the service is being provided by a human agent, they don't give a damn really. They want to receive a good service. That means if they have a question, they want those questions to be answered and answered well and answered timely, etc. So what majority of the people that we found care about is just general good quality standard of a service. And the deceptiveness part, at least in our industry, maybe it's because of our specific segment, we have not seen that being an issue. Now I listen to calls, and nobody has sent me sort of an angry email about this as well. So we don't have evidence yet to suggest that people feel like that they were deceived. But then there's also another maybe thing about our business because we do offer AI agents as a product as well, specifically designed only for email communication and reaching out on social, so specifically LinkedIn. So people maybe just assume that we also have voice agent capability, so they don't feel maybe offended that the voice AI agent calls them. But at the end of the day, a lot of people, because they have not been exposed to AI agents ever yet, I would say about 90+% of the user base has never interacted with the agentic capability. So when an agent calls you, you're just curious. You just keep on having conversation. You're trying to figure out what's happening and trying to, because it's for most people out there, it's like a new experience. It's like, wow, I wonder what he's gonna answer when I'm gonna ask this particular question, right? So people are curious and genuinely they just want to explore and just kind of continue the conversation, and then they actually book a meeting because either they genuinely want to have that meeting with us, great, or they just want to see how the process even works because yeah, we're a sales technology business, so people are also trying to figure out how does this thing work and how does the funnel work, and that's why they're part of that experience. Because they all, a lot of businesses also want to implement these voice AI agents and in email agents, whatever you want to call it, right? So to improve their business. But they just have never, they need to be, yeah, I guess, inspired, by another business like us,
Yeah, well,
to
I
see
think
what is
it must
possible.
be an advantage if you're demonstrating your own product. There's going to be some people that will go down that line. The other advantage is that you're kind of ahead of the curve in demonstrating this. So you're going to have a lot of curiosity. A year from now, those stats may look completely different in that people do not want to. I don't know. I'm just curious, really, which is why I asked the question. And for kind of smaller and mid-cap companies and that have a linear process, I absolutely see, this working and the element of curiosity. But when we're talking about the larger enterprise or complex organizations, I know that 80% of enterprise IT leaders cite major delays in connecting AI with their CRM stack, and that agents and although they enable the availability and predictive precision, research also warns there's bias, there's risk, there's data inconsistencies and integration failures.
Mhm.
So, from a larger organization, how are they able to get that transformation without all of the risks and the integration failures?
Good question. So I would say that there are AI agents that are designed for more, let's call it for mass market, like ours. And then there are AI agents that are designed specifically for enterprise needs, let's go that way, right? So because they have X type of needs, they have concerns, more questions on the security front, etc. So you see already in the market, like how saturated it became that, that you have these agents for like a general, more kind of, generic agents, let's call it, for anybody, for any type of business. And then there are agents that are only built for the enterprise world, and they're very expensive, very sophisticated, and you can have a bunch of various rail guards and maybe more advanced integrations and et cetera, et cetera. So I would say my first thought that comes to mind, when answering this question is like, you need to choose the right agents, because there's a lot of them in the market, right? So, but they are agents for different use cases that are designed for enterprise companies out there, but also the price tag is significantly higher. So a typical, just to give you an example, if I'm looking at our agent, which is more for the mass market and like more sort of SMB and sort of mid markets, meaning you're a smaller company, let's say less than 200 employees. Our agent may be about $600 a month that you'll be paying for it. Whereas if you're going to be buying an enterprise grade of an agent, typically it starts with about $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and that's just the starting point. And it just scales from there on, depending on the sort of scale that you're operating, how many leads you're processing, etc. But they are a lot more sophisticated. They do things like SOC 2 compliance, and ISO and etc. Maybe a bunch of things, and then they spend a lot of time on compliance topics and etc. And I would say just a different motion, and you're designing the product very differently, where there's a lot of, I would say, customization, I guess, because not every business is different, right? But specifically in the enterprise world, there's the complexities. There's one type of complexity, then for the same competitor, there's they do the same thing differently, so they have a different stack and different process and different policies, etc. And yes, the agent has to comply, otherwise it's going to fail the the tests, from the IT and the security team, right? So, and they will definitely not put that into production, right, when they see significant risks. So yeah, it is trickier. But at the same time, I think agents are inevitable also in enterprise, because there are specifically budgets today that you can see in the world of enterprise that have been dedicated towards advancing AI, and that literally means bringing in AI capabilities into the business. Now, there's typically two options how you can go about this. Either you build these AI capabilities custom built, by your IT team, and you bring that in, or you bring in what's called off-the-shelf solutions, right, from the market, where these solutions are, specialized solutions for specific areas of the business. And I don't think there's what I would say right or wrong in terms of the approach. I think the more complex or the more strict your business is, you probably want to build your own kind of stuff, especially if you have the manpower and the budgets and everything that you can allocate towards this. But it is inevitable, and you can see larger companies like Microsoft, IBM, etc., implementing these systems very aggressively. And then in areas like, for example, customer support, they're able to reduce headcount by up to 50%. So you see these massive gains, which is why I'm saying it's inevitable, because there are some parts of the business, any business, enterprise or not, which are very, very repetitive. And suddenly, with all the new technology, LLMs and everything, you are able to make your company leaner and meaner. It's just that, I guess, the complexity of the introducing, right, and making sure you're onboarding the whole company. The world of enterprise takes, maybe 1, 2, 3 years to get everything onboarded. Whereas, a typical customer that we're working with, they're ready to rock on their own in a couple of weeks, and we already have agents, spinning up. But that was always the case, I think, with any other technology back in the days, that, the smaller companies like SMBs and mid-market companies, they would introduce tech much, much faster. And then it takes the enterprise world like 1, 2, 3 years, to actually introduce this, because they're very cautious, right? Or they have a lot of barriers, in place, and people have to get comfortable. And there are always these big questions also asked internally. So what if we're going to introduce these AI agents? What's going to happen to our jobs? And there's thousands of jobs on the line, right? And there's a lot of people that get worried, when they hear AI agents are coming into Google, Microsoft, IBM, right? They know what's coming, because if this is going to get introduced in our department, and then we know that we won't have the headcount requirement anymore, right? So yeah, there's definitely things like that are coming still a lot, I think, across different businesses, but it is inevitable, because I don't see a reason why wouldn't you implement that, especially considering the fact that last year maybe AI agents weren't that great because they were still in its infancy. This year we see a lot of great capabilities, and next year we just get massively better, right? So there's what's called this sort of compound efficiency that AI agents, will have over time. They just get better, better, better over time. It's not a case with humans. The humans are sort of, always sort of, let's call it an average, right? There's an average, and then you train them up. Some people come and go. But an agent, once you implement it, you're able to massively improve its capabilities. So there is definitely efficiency that compounds over time. It just gets better. So after 1, 2, 3 years, suddenly the same agent is able maybe to produce 2x of an output what it's doing today. And that's great. Wouldn't be possible with the same, mindset of, hiring teams and, et cetera. It just, it's not feasible, it's not possible. So that's how I think about the world and why, it's just inevitable of them being introduced across different.
Well, I certainly feel your passion for it, and it is a good point. Humans have this kind of average limit, don't they? And some may go above it, whereas AI's it's considered to be infinite, and they're learning all the time, and they never stop. Right. So yeah, it's a really interesting point. Okay, I'd like to ask you about what advice you would give, as a CEO, another CEO of an enterprise company that may have some of that caution, rightly so, but has some of that in terms of a roadmap for 2026 into 2027. What advice would you give them?
So my advice is, if you have not been implementing any form of what I would call autonomous systems, then you're already late, essentially, into the game. Because if typically if you are in the US, a lot of companies are already, they already familiar with the topic. They already understand why it needs to be done. They understand that that if you're not doing it, then your competitors will. But I think the rest of the world always lags behind, and they kind of typically say, let the Americans do their thing, and then we'll implement it later on. But I would say if you're a CEO of an enterprise company, you should definitely bake that into your plan for next year. So you need to allocate, resource, meaning the right people for the job, and then actually budget against that. And I would say internally, the people for this particular topic are the wrong people, if I'm very honest. I like when I think about my days of working in bigger companies, etc. When you would go through this sort of transformation, you do not have typically the right people with the right mindset and maybe expertise, maybe on the AI front or the transformation front, to actually bring that change quickly enough so you see the value and the right value, right? So because you definitely don't want to be the CEO that implements these systems and then they will fail at the end of it, right? So when you're going to launch that, you definitely want to do it correctly. But the problem is that a typical company does not have expertise internally to roll this out really correctly. Because you find that the right people are typically outside of these organizations, and they typically have to come into the organization to actually bring the change.
So Frank, could I ask you one of the answers to this? If you're, a clear thinking CEO, that you actually set up a side operation. Yeah. And because you've got a legacy system and all of the risk associated within the legacy. So if you set up this side project, bring in the right people, and they're able to develop it, knowing the internal system, but outside of the internal system, and get proof of concept, and then there's going to be a blend of the two, really, isn't there, really? But you can phase it in on that basis. If you're doing it from an internal point of view, then you're constantly up against pushback, aren't you? Yes, constantly up against. And so I was shocked when you said it's 2-3 years for an enterprise to develop that. I'm thinking, well, that's too long. There's, it's already done and moved on by then, 2-3 years. Whereas actually, perhaps the answer is that you don't develop it internally. You have a side shoot. I don't know what your thoughts are. You're closer to this.
So there's always internal politics, which is why it's a risk to have somebody doing this internally. You need somebody that it comes in like what we typically call like a mercenary. They come in, do the job, do it fast, do it well. They get paid the right amount of money to do it. Then they know what what needs to happen at the end because they've done this maybe in other companies, etc. Right? and they will bring in that expertise by implementing, and I think speed matters because you can't have this sort of dragging on for a very long time. And there's definitely risk associated, doing this internally. Somebody internally is in charge of this. I mean, it's fine to have somebody to coordinate this whole process internally, but I would say the expertise, implementation, and how it has to look comes from somebody outside. Because AI just generally still, a very, very, let's call it new topic, especially the Gen AI, right? There's definitely the machine learning side of the things, because, AI or machine learning, the old AI exists for a long time, actually. But the new AI and all the, everything that we're discussing, that's, around for, still a very short time. So in order to understand what needs to be done, you need to have experience implementing these sort of systems in multiple different businesses. And that's not what an employee in an enterprise company has. Right. And so as a result, what will happen is you are just more likely to fail when you're going to implement these systems. Hence why there's a necessity to bring somebody from outside and plug that in order to see, benefit fast. Because essentially, the reason why I'm mentioning this as well is because if you've been reading a lot of news out there over the last 6 months, then there's also a lot of topic that AI doesn't actually bring any benefit to the businesses. And then my first question becomes about orchestration. How has it been, implemented and orchestrated? Because I would be very surprised if you don't see benefit. Like, it's just not possible. That means the implementation has been said, incorrectly. And then when I look at the most sophisticated companies in the world that I know, they're typically in the technology space. When they always have been implementing the AI systems, they always saw a benefit. And then suddenly in the news, there's a bunch of other companies that say they don't see a benefit. So that's an example where there's sort of a disconnect. And I think there have been failures in a lot of organizations of implementing these systems. Of course, they're not seeing any benefit. Yeah.
So I've got another question in terms of advising a CEO of, small and mid-cap companies. And, would it be your starting point is identify those kind of more linear steps and, look to off the shelf, you haven't got the probably the funds to develop yourself. Is that what you would advise a CEO of, your customer base?
Yeah, I would typically start, understanding of what the cost base is, So if you have a lot of cost base and a lot of repetitive tasks in a particular area of the business, like customer support, for example, or something else, then yes. So this is a clear business case, of where you want to bring in the system. And when there's a lot of more sort of ambiguity, where that's an example of where you're less likely to introduce, or it's just higher risk, failure. But yeah, there has to be sort of a streamlined process that you're doing this for a long time, but you also have a lot of headcount in that space. And so what you're doing is headcount, optimization ultimately, because like every CEO would want to run leaner and meaner organization, right? And yeah, whenever we look at our business, we also look at our, where do we have the most headcount in? And can we justify keeping the headcount? And why our headcount isn't smaller is always the question, I know a lot of I think in the old days, a lot of CEOs, a lot of people were very proud to say, oh, we manage so many employees. But today, the best thing that you can say to any investor or in the market in the world is how much revenue you are making per employee. And that means actually you have the smallest team. You're making a lot of money, but you have a very small and lean team. And this is what means impressive today. It's not even impressive to say that you have thousands of employees, to be honest. Because by default, I'm starting to think you have too much fat to trim, essentially, because you have not been implementing systems. So there's definitely this question back of my mind from somebody that brings in very efficient systems. Why do you have so many employees? Why haven't you been cutting down? And then the smartest organizations definitely are the ones where you see that year over year revenue per employee increases. And I think that's what you can measure. That's an example of measurement that you can take in your business and start from there. And then by implementing these systems, things have to go up. And if they don't go up, then something is not working. So
yeah, got it. All right. So Frank, who is your hero or shiro?
Hero. So I mean, My hero, and I know the character is a bit controversial, but because I'm big into tech and agents and generally that would be Elon Musk. Um, Even though he's very, very controversial. But on the tech front, you have to tap him on the back on everything that has been doing, and bringing the world kind of, massively, further, whether that's the rockets or, whatever. He does a lot of things, right? So he has like hundreds of businesses by now. But yeah, these are the people that, I would typically aspire to because they bring real change in the world, also in different areas, whether that's, the automotive or the rockets or whatever else. And that inspires me. And I think also a lot of people that I know to make a difference in other areas, technology areas, so yeah.
Lovely. So how can listeners get hold of you, Frank?
Best will be on LinkedIn. This is where I'm typically very, very active. So Frank Sondors, the guy with the bacon emoji, you'll see that bacon emoji. It comes from the saying "bringing home the bacon" in the
Yeah.
US. So we help companies to bring home more bacon, and we just do that, by blending, human sales teams with AI agents, and that's where we see high output levels and lower cost per unit, whether you measure that as a meeting booked or something else. So yeah.
Lovely. Excellent. Well, thank you for all of your insight. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Frank.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you. If you enjoy this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, explore other episodes of insightful guest conversations or watch the caption show on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with strategies to help you scale your sales. I love to hear your thoughts, so please share your views and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more revenue generators just like you. So until next time, keep scaling your sales.